great Odin's raven.
I feel the need for speed.
Ow!
Oh, no, not the bees! Not the bees! Ah!
Hey! Where did you get those clothes? At the toilet store?
And I thought my jokes were bad.
Good afternoon, everybody, or evening, or whatever time of day it is that you are now listening to this. This is another episode, Season 2. We're calling this Season 2. I don't know if you really do that in radio and podcasts or anything, but we're calling this officially Season 2. So welcome to Season 2, Episode 3 of MIATC and the Chief. Chief, how are you today?
Not so good. My college picks sucked last week.
Yeah. Patrick, for those of you who didn't take part in our Pick'em Challenge, one, feel free to start this week. But two, you missed out on some fun last week because Patrick did just awful. I think there were, four of us that did it? Is that what we decided? There were 4 of us who did it, and Patrick is in dead last right now. But we'll get to that. We are going to recap last week a little bit to start off with. I know. We talked yesterday about the Ray Rice situation. We're going to talk more about that a little bit later on when we get to the NFL. But for now, we are going to talk actual sports because we're not TMZ. We're not First Take. We're not those shows. So we are actually going to talk sports because there's a good chance that you're probably not getting sports from anywhere else. So last week, Patrick, not really just a whole lot of big games, right?
No, we're in this stretch where you got your big teams playing, your Montana States, your Southeast Missouri States, your
South Carolina States, your Cleveland
State, all those guys.
Yeah. So a lot of games that don't really mean a whole lot in the grand scheme of things because, like I mentioned, you got games where number 23 Clemson is playing South Carolina State and winning 73-7. You got, your teams like Oregon. Oregon actually played a good game. My bad. I don't know why I said that. I meant Texas A&M. You got your teams like Texas A&M that are playing nobodies like Lamar and winning 73-3. Baylor 70-6. LSU 56-0. So you got plenty of games like that. But you did have some good games. There were a couple of good games, and we're going to specifically start off talking kind of about the ones that were in the Pick'em Challenge, which we still don't have an official name for. So I guess just for now it's the Pick'em Challenge because we don't have a name for it. But
any sponsors listening, please sponsor our challenge.
Yeah, if you own a business, we will take money to name it that and call it that, and we'll tweet about it every single day until everybody's annoyed with it. So look, let's talk about some of these games. We won't spend a whole lot of time on these because we do want to preview next week and talk about the games we're going to pick, and we want to do that pretty quick so we can spend some more time on NFL. BYU Texas ended up not being close at all. 41-7 in favor of BYU.
I hope Charlie Strong realizes that he cannot have this kind of outcome every single week and plan to stay in Texas for as long as he wants to stay.
Yeah,
because you can't lose the BYU stat. You can't lose the BYU one, but you can't get destroyed by BYU and expect for Texas fans to still accept you with open arms because they really weren't doing that to begin with.
Yeah, when you lose to a team, and not that BYU's a bad team, but when you lose to any team 41-7 and your school is UT, when you're the Longhorns, when you have your own television network, you're probably not going to last too long there. And I'm not saying fire Charlie Strong right now because he inherited a pretty poor team with no quarterback. But that's pretty awful. Did anybody pick? I don't think any of our people picked BYU, did they? I mean, pick Texas. My bad, because I know I picked BYU.
Actually, I believe we did.
Oh.
Hold on.
I
know. Let me see. I'm going to pull up our Facebook page.
Well,
and
while you're pulling that up, we'll move on to some of the other games because that's I feel bad for that person.
I do know Sean Lawrence did indeed pick Texas
Ooh.
to beat BYU.
That's rough, but you know what? Overall, he's still beating you. So,
Well, everyone's beating me.
as much as that stinks to have picked that game, he is doing better than you. Oregon beats Michigan State. I don't want to say that's a surprise because those teams were so evenly matched. I think it was a little bit of a surprise for me, at least, that Michigan State was ahead at some point, but then Oregon just poured it on. Ends up winning 46-27. And I think that's a statement win for Oregon. I think that's a big win for Oregon early. You know, they have a tendency to lose some games that they probably shouldn't lose, and so it's good for them to go out and win a game that could go either way and win it in the end that convincingly.
I think this was a tough loss for Michigan State in the sense that now that Ohio State is starting to backpedal with the Braxton Miller injury, a win against Ohio State doesn't matter as much as it would have 2 months ago. So when you look at their schedule, this is probably the biggest win that they could possibly have, and no game on the schedule is going to even come close to it. So they could run the table and look good, but once the committee steps back and looks at, quality of schedule, strength of schedule, everything else, they're going to see that all of their wins are a little lackluster because of the fact they didn't have any wins that stood out on the schedule. And if they would have beat Oregon, that would have been the signature win to put them ahead of one or two teams that were tied with them, maybe to get to second or third or maybe that last spot into the playoffs. So Oregon, different story. They do play other teams in that conference who is a little bit tougher. I know that they have USC, they have Stanford and UCLA, but everyone knows the Big Ten is horrible. So Michigan State has a lot of catching up to do as far as trying to get into the playoffs.
Yeah, I think you're right there. In terms of the playoffs, I think Michigan State's probably, and anybody in the Big Ten is now on the outside looking in. They're going to have to hope that some teams, both in the SEC, some teams in the Pac-12 beat each other up in order for them to get in. I think that game was a must-win game for both teams. Not so much for Oregon in the sense of it being a big game that they had to win, but I think it was a must-win for them in the sense that if they had lost that game, they probably would have been out of the playoffs because there would have been a good chance that they would lose to your Stanford, lose to USC, something like that. There's a good chance that they could lose to one of those teams, and then they'd be sitting there with 2 losses. So I think that's a huge win for them in terms of getting into the playoffs because I think now, at worst case, Oregon's going to have 1 loss. I think they definitely every year we say this, but they have the talent to run the table. It's just a matter of whether they can put it together in big games or not. So kind of keeping along the Big Ten lines, we're not really going to talk about this game because it ended up being a blowout, and I think that is the only reason that it even kind of blips on the radar of games to talk about, and the fact that it was in our pick'em. But Michigan just gets destroyed by Notre Dame. I don't think either one of those teams were good necessarily, but I do have to say Notre Dame looked better than what I thought they would have.
Yeah, I think especially coming into the year with 4 of their top players being academically ineligible, suspended for their, cheating scandal or whatever. Going in, a lot of people thought that would hurt them as far as
including you.
Top 25. Oh, yeah, of course. I counted them out this game.
And me. I'll give you that.
Oh, of course. But Notre Dame, I think, really surprised some people. One, because of the fact that they had a blowout win like this. But not only that, but it was against a notable team like Michigan who going into this game, I thought could contest against the Ohio State and Michigan State as far as winning that conference. But after that, of course, Michigan takes a backpedal. But I think Notre Dame earned some respect for the fans who, going into week one even, thought that Notre Dame was a little bit overrated as far as their rankings. But now I think they're starting to earn their spot. So it's going to be interesting to see going through this week and the rest of the season how well Notre Dame really is.
Yeah, I'm not sold on them yet. I'm not willing to say that they still aren't overrated. I understand they put together 2 pretty good games, but at the same time, this early in the season, it's hard to tell how good Michigan is. It's hard to tell how good the Big Ten is as a whole. Obviously, you saw a lot of losses this week. Purdue losing to Central Michigan. Who's the other one? Illinois barely squeaking by Western Kentucky. So, I think we're seeing a pretty weak Big Ten. McNeese State almost beating Nebraska. So I'm not willing to say that Notre Dame's not overrated yet, but they're definitely a team to keep an eye on because if they keep playing like that, there's a good chance we could see them in the playoffs. Nothing really to say about Vandy Ole Miss. That was kind of a throwaway game in a sense for our pick'em. I think everybody pretty much thought Vandy was going to get destroyed, and they did. So then our last game to kind of recap from last week, USC Stanford. I got to be honest, I thought Stanford was going to pull that one out. They didn't. USC wins that game. 13 versus 14. I'm not sure that's a shock, but at the same time, I think I thought Stanford was a little bit better than that.
We all thought Stanford was a little bit better than that because of the fact that they have their quarterback, Stephen. I believe Hogan is third year.
Yeah, he started several years at least.
This is his third year, I believe, as a starter for Stanford. And USC, don't know how many games their quarterback has started right off the top of my head. But just going off of that, the preseason hoopla, you could say, that they have been going through off the field, you would think that their heads probably weren't going to be fully into football, but USC proved us wrong, and their USC is looking kind of they're in the same category with Notre Dame, and since they're starting to earn their top 25 rankings and earn their respect, a lot of people didn't necessarily want to give them at first.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and I think that's a good spot to kind of end our recap from last week. Is just keep an eye on teams like Notre Dame, keep an eye on teams like USC because they're question marks, and I don't mean that in a bad way or a good way necessarily. We just don't know exactly what to expect from them. So keep an eye on those teams as we go along. I do have to say. Both of our listeners in this went 4-1 in college football, and neither one of us did. I went 3-2. Pat went 2-3. So good job on that, fellas. And we'll get to your NFL stuff later. But so let's talk about this week fairly quickly because we do have a lot of other stuff to talk about. Again, this is kind of one of those weeks where there's not a whole lot of just great games going on. You got a lot of. Do what? Yeah, got a couple good games. So we're gonna talk about those. And let's start off with the SEC. We got South Carolina playing Georgia. South Carolina, who has kind of, I don't want to say they're bad, but they have not played nearly as well as everybody thought they were going to, for sure. So tell me real quickly who you got in that game.
I have Georgia going for that game. Georgia has been playing the way that everyone sort of thought they would. The loss of Aaron Murray, we all figure would kind of put Georgia back a little bit, but they had a tendency to kind of regroup and reload on all of their holes, which includes quarterback as well. And I thought at first that Georgia would fall back, but Georgia is proving me wrong, which is fine by me. I'm wrong with a lot of things. But Georgia is proving to me that they could go in and win the East and challenge any team in the SEC that comes out of the West as far as winning the SEC title. And I think that a lot of people are going to be surprised of how well they're going to beat South Carolina, just because of the fact that Dylan Thompson is not looking as good as he did last year, because he did play considerably amount last year. He looked well then. He doesn't really look that great now. They haven't really established a great rushing attack yet. Their defense is starting to fall a little bit. They regrouped a little bit compared to the A&M game, but it's still not in the same place they would like it to be. And I think Georgia's going to expose that defense, kind of like A&M did.
Yeah, Georgia's kind of, and it's interesting because they went through kind of the same sort of change when Matt Stafford left, when he graduated. Everybody thought they were going to kind of fall off, and then Aaron Murray took over and did fine. Now, granted, this guy, I can't think of his name off the top of my head, isn't a true freshman or isn't a redshirt freshman like those guys were, but at the same time, he's played pretty decent so far. Now, obviously, I think Gurley's the big player on that Georgia offense, and if he plays well, Georgia's going to play well. So I'm picking Georgia. I don't think South Carolina's going to win it. South Carolina hadn't looked good enough. They barely squeaked by East Carolina, who's not a terrible team, but South Carolina, if you want to be the kind of team that you looked like you were going to be at the beginning of the season, have got to be beating them better. So I am by far going Georgia there. Our next game on the pick, UCLA versus Texas. We'll just kind of skip over that one and get our pick, because I think after last week, even though UCLA kind of struggled with Memphis a little bit, which is a little concerning, I do think they're probably head and shoulders still better than Texas. So I'm picking UCLA. Who do you got real quick, Pat?
I'm picking UCLA. It's probably going to be just as bad as a beatdown as the BYU game.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to surprise anybody who's not a Texas fan if Texas gets beat pretty badly in that game. So we'll move on. Next game on the pick'em list, we got Penn State versus Rutgers, which is surprisingly a battle of two undefeated teams at this point. Who you got in that one?
This is a little bit of a tough one. I mean, not just because of the fact that they're 2-0, but these Big Ten games are going to be really tough just because of the fact that none of these teams are really that great. So none other than an Ohio State who had Braxton Miller, or you could still put in Michigan State in the mix, even though they did lose to Oregon, who, let's say, they're going to be in the playoffs, so that doesn't mean that they're a bad team. None of these teams are just really that good. None of them stand out. So I'm going to go with the line here just because of the fact that these teams are pretty much evenly matched. And I'm going to take Penn State in this one.
Yeah, no, we're not going to disagree on this one. I am also taking Penn State, even though it's at Rutgers. I'm going to give Penn State, and really this is the reason I'm saying they're going to win. I'm giving Penn State the go-ahead in this game strictly because they just got all their sanctions lifted. Or not, I don't know if all of them got lifted. Did all of them, every single one of them get lifted? I'm not sure if all of them did. But
their scholarships are going to be replenished starting next season.
They get their scholarships back next season.
Their bowl ban was lifted.
Yeah, and so they're going to be bowl eligible this year, and they're actually looking like they're a pretty good team despite kind of how, dealing with a new coach and obviously still coming off all that. So I'm going Penn State. like we're maybe going to have some more technical difficulties again this week. Hopefully that clears up the rest of the show. I said I was picking Penn State, so we'll move on from that. We're both picking Penn State in that game. Next game we got Tennessee versus Oklahoma. I'm picking the upset here. I'm going to go Tennessee. I think Tennessee's a dangerous team because they have so many freshmen and they play so many freshmen, and they're pretty darn good freshmen. And I don't think they're going to be scared to go into Oklahoma and win a game. And I do still think Oklahoma's overrated. So I'm going to go Tennessee in that game. Who you got?
I agree with you in the sense that Oklahoma is overrated, but I don't think that Tennessee can go in to Norman and beat them. I do think that Oklahoma will probably beat them by, I would say, 17.
Ooh.
I wanted to say 3, but I gave them the benefit of the doubt and just tacked a field goal on there. I do think Oklahoma's good, though. I think they are. I think they're a solid team. I don't think they're top 5 team. I do think they're probably like the 20-25 range. Because I do. I think they're good. They proved last season how good they were. Obviously, they beat Alabama in their bowl game. And they are picking up where they started, for picking up from where they left off, I should say. They've had blowout wins back-to-back against some lackluster teams, but not necessarily terrible teams with Tulsa and Louisiana Tech. And I do think they're going to play really well, of course, at home against Tennessee. And I will even say this, they'll win by 17.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I don't think Oklahoma's a bad team. I just don't. I think they're probably somewhere more in that 10 to 15 range, which is actually, I guess, saying better than what you think. But I just think this is one of those games. They come in off of 2 cupcakes and face a Tennessee team that I think they're severely underrated, just largely because people don't know what to expect week to week from them because they're playing so many freshmen, and that makes them a little bit dangerous. So I don't disagree with you in the sense that I don't think they're a good team, but I think Oklahoma's a beatable team, and I think Tennessee is the type of team that can come in and create an upset. So that's why I'm going there. But our last college game we got, we're gonna, and this is hard for us to not be biased on, or at least it's hard for me not to be biased on. But we've got Arkansas State versus Miami, Florida, not Miami of Ohio. We got Miami, Florida, not the Ben Roethlisberger school. We have the Hurricanes. Who do you got before I say who I have?
I have a feeling of who you're going to say just because it's the way you put it. I would love to pick ASU to get the upset win and have that big marquee victory that they've been looking for a while to put that program up to the next level. I can't see it happening this week. I'm going to give the edge to Miami just because of the fact that if they were playing in Jonesboro, I would definitely have to think about picking ASU. But the fact that they're playing at home at Miami, with that big crowd that they're gonna have for the game, it puts a slight edge for me to Miami. So I'm gonna stick with that pick. I'm gonna say Miami. I'll say Miami by 10 though.
Ooh. Well, look, we are going to disagree here, and I'm actually going to go. I'm going with Arkansas State, and I don't think it's as big of an upset necessarily as a lot of people will think it is out in the world. I think, look, if you go back and watch last week's game against Tennessee, if Arkansas State beat itself, a lot of stupid penalties, a lot of just mistakes here and there, and if they can clean those up, it would have been a very, very close game, possibly could have been a win for Arkansas State. I think Miami's not as good as Tennessee is. I think Miami is very beatable. I think they're the type of team, I know they're the type of fan base, I think they're the type of team who would overlook a team like Arkansas State and assume that they should just beat them because they're the U. So I'm picking Arkansas State to win that, and I think it's gonna be close, but I think Arkansas State's gonna win it just based off of they've got to play a perfect game though.
So I agree with that.
They can't afford to make the dumb penalties and dumb mistakes that they made last week. Mainly, they've got to find somebody who can catch a punt consistently because that is killing Arkansas State right now.
But Kip needs to learn how to actually catch before he starts running.
Yeah, so we're gonna hope that gets figured out. But I'm going Arkansas State. So what? That's our only disagreement is Arkansas State.
No, we have the Oklahoma Tennessee.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, so we're gonna be a little
for college this week.
Yeah, so we're a little different this week. But that is college football. So go ahead and tweet your picks. You can wait until we go to the NFL stuff before you tweet them at us or Facebook us your picks. But go ahead and write those down so you know what they are. But get those to us at some point in time. But we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back to talk about the NFL. All right, guys, welcome back. It's time to now move from the college game to the moneymakers. We're going to the pros. So let's start by recapping last week. We'll talk about our picks very, very briefly because I don't think there's just a ton to analyze, and we're not going to learn anything from week one, I don't think. Let's start with what ended up kind of being a good game, but I don't remember if both of us got it right or not, but the Monday night game, the last game of the week, Arizona versus San Diego. Arizona ends up winning that 18-17. I don't remember who picked who in that.
You picked Arizona, and I picked San Diego for that game.
Yeah, so it was a pretty even game, though, so I don't think we didn't learn anything about either one of those two teams, I don't think. That was just kind of a toss-up, I feel like.
No, we didn't learn any of those about anything.
I think those are both playoff teams, though, if they play their season right. I think those are both teams that could be in the playoffs, I guess would be a better way to say that.
If I thought San Diego could be a playoff team going in, but I think that if Arizona can play the same defense that they played the other night, if they can keep that up all season long, then they will definitely be a playoff team.
Yeah, so Arizona, your winner there. Cincinnati versus Baltimore. Cincinnati pulls out a 23-16 victory despite giving up 345 yards passing to Joe Flacco. Again, I think that's another game where we didn't really learn anything necessarily. We learned that, if we did learn anything, we learned that just like seemingly every year in the AFC North, Cincinnati can win close games.
That may be the storyline as far as Cincy is winning those close games.
Yeah.
I mean, we know that they'll beat Cleveland. Their next game against Baltimore, I think that they'll pull off. But Pittsburgh is definitely going to be the question mark for everyone else in that division.
Yeah, Pittsburgh's kind of the wild card there. And not necessarily a wild card team, but just a wild card in the sense that we don't know what they're going to do. I think that's very safe to say. Another game, San Fran versus Dallas, which despite the scoreline, I think is a little bit closer of a game than what it turned out to be. San Francisco wins that 28-17. Of course, everybody's storyline from that is the fact that Tony Romo threw 3 interceptions. But I just, it tells me again that I'm just not sold on San Francisco as a team.
San Francisco scored 21 points in the first quarter, 2 of them defensively, another one with a touchdown run, I believe. But other than that, they did score one more to make it 28. But I do think that Dallas is actually a better team than everyone thought they would be. I think that with the holes on offense and the fact that everyone thought they were lacking any sort of a defense, everyone thought that Dallas is going to be bottom of the totem pole, but they're proving to be a pretty decent team. Playoffs, I don't know. We'll find out.
Well, look, I think, and I'll stand by what I said at the beginning of the season preview. I think they're the best team in a bowl of crap because there's not a single good team, it doesn't seem like, in the NFC East. Philadelphia struggled with Jacksonville for a long time before they finally won that. So I think those two teams are pretty much even, but it's a big load of crap in that. That's the nicest way to put it in the NFC East. So keep an eye on Dallas. In a game that was close for you, Indy loses to Denver 31-24. Again, I don't think that's a game where we really learned anything. That played out pretty much exactly how I think we both would have figured it would have. I think really the only surprising thing about it is that Luck outpassed Peyton Manning. Luck had 370 yards passing in that game to lead the game. So did you learn anything from that other than the fact that maybe the Colts can't play great defense?
Well, the Mathis suspension now / injury because he's going to be out for the rest of the year. That's going to hurt that team quite a bit. He was the anchor for that defense. He will definitely put some chaos on that line in order to hurt the quarterback, sack the quarterback, that kind of deal. Other than that, the O-line was a weak point, and they proved that during that game. Andrew Luck had to hurry up with a lot of his passes. That's where some of those mistakes were made. Other than that, I did not learn a whole lot from that game. I knew Denver was pretty much Denver that game. They looked like they did last year. So as far as that game, I did not learn a whole lot. I knew pretty much everything going in from what I saw. So no surprises there.
Yeah, that's a game I would have rather seen like week 5 or 6, I think, to really know how good or how much better either one of those two teams are. Our last game that we picked last week, Seattle, which was actually the first game of the season. Seattle beats Green Bay 36-16. Again, I think that's just one of those games that kind of proved a point that we already knew, that Seattle can play defense and they can kind of play offense too. They're not a one-dimensional team, and that's why they won the Super Bowl last year. So I wasn't surprised at all by that. Just maybe the trick is you shouldn't put Seattle in primetime games because they pretty much go out and destroy teams when they play in primetime.
That's why that's their only game at home for primetime. It's just because of the fact that everyone had to put them on that one because they won the Super Bowl. I will say, I was listening to the Dan Patrick Show, which I listen to quite a bit. I listened to that the following morning, and they always put a daily poll question on. And the poll question they had for that show was, after seeing last night's game, are you going to change your Super Bowl pick? And I believe it was like 60. It was like high 60s, low 70% said they were going to change their Super Bowl pick after seeing that game.
Yeah, I mean, granted, I picked Seattle to win anyways, but I don't think that's necessarily a game you change your pick over. We don't know how good Green Bay is yet. We don't know how bad Green Bay might be. I think they're a good team. I think they're a playoff team, but I think it's a little early to be jumping your Super Bowl pick unless you picked Seattle Seahawks to start the season, in which case you're a smart person because that's who I picked. So, look, that's last week. Real quick, we'll recap how well we did. I went 5-0 last week. You went 4-1.
Respect.
Our listeners respectfully went 3-2 and 4-1. So, NFL.
Do you know who the 3-2 and 4-1 were?
Sean was 3-2. Cam was 4-1.
Okay.
So,
I will.
Patrick, you're still in last overall, though.
Right.
I just want to keep reminding you that. You're in last overall.
Yeah, that's nice. Let's just go ahead and recap all the NFL games just because of the fact there's only 16 of them. Saints lost to the Falcons. That score was 37-34. It went in overtime. Vikings beat the Rams 34-6. Steelers beat the Browns late in that game 30-27. Eagles squeaked by the Jaguars second half to win 34-17. Jets beat the Raiders 19-14. Bengals beat the Ravens 23-16. Bills upset the Bears in overtime 23-20. Texans beat the Redskins 17-6. Titans upset the Chiefs 26-10. Dolphins upset the Patriots 33-20. Derek Anderson led Panthers beat the Buccaneers 2014, and Lions destroy the Giants 35-14.
Yeah, I think a couple games that we can kind of just mention that were obviously a little bit of a shock. I think that Atlanta goes in and beats New Orleans. I think we expect New Orleans to win that game. Or at least we thought it at the beginning of the season, so that's kind of an interesting result. What was the other one? The Bills beating Chicago is a bit of an interesting result. Not too big of an upset necessarily because it's Chicago and they Chicago things a lot. And then Miami beating New England. I said at the beginning of the year that I thought Miami is a playoff team. And so I think it's a lot of people are looking at that as, oh crap, how bad are the Patriots? But I'm looking at it more of, the Miami Dolphins are actually just a better team than everybody thought they were. So a couple interesting results. It was a good first week of football, good first week of NFL. So a lot of games to enjoy there. But look, let's talk about this week because we have games this week, and we have some games that we need to pick this week as well. And so let's go ahead and we'll do that. We got 5 games like normal. We'll start with Detroit and Carolina. After last week, the way Detroit played and the way Carolina played, who do you have in that?
I'm going to pick Detroit in that game. I honestly, Carolina, while they did impress me in the sense that they were playing with their backup quarterback with the ancient Derek Anderson.
Who I forgot was still in the league.
I did not forget that. I just never thought I would see him play again. While they were playing him as starting quarterback, they were playing the Buccaneers, which I didn't think was going to be that great of a team. They are bad. So as good as they were last week, I can't tell how good they actually are. I think this game is going to tell me how good they actually will be. But Matt Stafford showed me the fact that he is just he was just lights out last week, and I'm going to keep his momentum going, and I'm going to pick Detroit to win that game.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you there. It's kind of a strength versus strength. Obviously, when we think of Carolina, we think defense first. If you don't think Cam Newton, you think defense first. And so I think Carolina defense first. Obviously, Detroit's offense first. But you look at that game, and granted, they were playing the Giants. They played pretty decent defense. But like you said, Matt Stafford looked lights out in that brand new offense. Looks like he finally feels comfortable in an offense. Now, granted, week 8 through 16, we may see a different Matt Stafford like we've seen through the past couple of years. But if he stays healthy and if he stays playing like he did this last week, that's a playoff team, and that's a team that could probably win the NFC North if they play like they did last week. So I'm going Detroit as well on that game. I think their offense is just too good, and Carolina's defense didn't show me quite enough against Tampa Bay to really give me a lot of confidence in that. The next game we're going to pick, Chicago versus San Francisco. I'll go ahead and kind of lead off on this one. I think it's a game of two teams that I think underwhelmed in the first week. And so it's kind of a tough one to pick. I still don't know how well Kaepernick's going to play this year, but at the same time, I also don't know which Jay Cutler we're going to see this game. So I'm actually going to go ahead and give San Francisco the edge in this game because they're playing at home, and I trust San Francisco's defense a little bit better than Chicago's, but it's really splitting hairs for me on that one.
Yeah. I'm going to pick his 49ers on this one. I think Kaepernick actually played pretty well last week, and with Chicago's revamping of their defense, I think Kaepernick is just going to continue where he left off, in my opinion, last week after that win against Dallas. I will have to admit I was wrong about Chicago's run defense. I thought that they were a lot better than they were. They're actually pretty terrible. I know Frank Gore I think he had around 60 yards last week against Dallas. I do think that him and Carlos Hyde are going to have a little bit better luck than they did last week. And I think that San Fran will pull the win on this one.
Yeah, so if you sat a Bills running back last week on Patrick's advice, you may not have done too well in fantasy football.
Sorry about that.
We're both going San Francisco there. A game of one sort of surprising team and another that's a solid, good team. Atlanta versus at Cincinnati. Who you got in that game? I think that's a pretty close, even game this early in the season. But who you got?
The Atlanta game?
Yeah, Atlanta, Cincinnati.
I have Atlanta in that game. Cincinnati gave up, 300 plus yards passing against Flacco. And we saw what Matty Ice, the
other Matty Ice, not
the
me.
well-paid Matty Ice.
I didn't. Yeah, the well-paid. I didn't play in the NFL this week, unfortunately.
The well-paid Matty Ice did against the Saints and their defense, who I will admit I did start the Saints defense in the league. Got me -5 points thanks to Matty Ice. But I think he's going to have the same 400-yard impact that he did against New Orleans, and I think Atlanta wins this one pretty easily.
I'm not going to say they win pretty easily, but I agree with you again. I think that that offense, if everybody in that offense is healthy, that's a dangerous offense, and we saw that last week. And so I'm going to go with Atlanta. I'm going to stick with Matty Ice, my namesake compatriot, on that one, and I'm going to pick them. I do think Cincinnati is an interesting team, and it is at Cincinnati, but this early in the season, the weather's not going to be a factor, and so I think I'm going to stick with Atlanta on that, no matter what. So the other game, or the fourth game of 5 games, we've got Philly and Indianapolis. I'll let you pick second on this one. This is a game where, based off what we've seen with Indy, it's hard to know if they're going to be able to stop Philadelphia's offense. Now, at the same time, I don't know if Philadelphia's defense can stop Indy's offense. So it could be a little bit. It could be a little bit of a shootout this week. Obviously, we'll see how Indy rebounds from losing Mathis for the year. It's kind of a toss-up, but I'm going to go Indy.
I'm going to go Indy. I think I have more confidence in Indy winning this game than you might have on this one. I think Philadelphia last week proved that they have a difficulty as far as getting their wheels behind them and getting their not necessarily just their offense, but their defense as well going. I think, if I'm correct, Jacksonville scored all their points in the first half. And that tells me if a Chad Henne-led Jaguars offense can put 17 on Philly in one half, I think Andrew Luck's going to be just fine.
Yeah.
And
I wouldn't worry
while
about
Indy's defense has a lot of holes, Jaguars defense has just as many, if not a lot more.
Yeah.
And they did very well in the first half of Philly. So I think Indy is going to be fine. They will allow they'll probably allow a couple touchdowns, but I do think that Indy will have no trouble at all scoring against Philly.
Well, and that's the Monday night game, and it's at Indianapolis. I like you said, I trust Indy giving up 31 points, being against Denver, being a better defense than Philadelphia, giving up 17 points and a half against the Jaguars. So anytime Chad Henne is leading an offense, you might want to watch out and not trust them a whole lot. Our last game in the NFL this week, we've got Seattle at San Diego. Real quick, it's Seattle. I'm picking Seattle. Not because San Diego is not a good team, but if San Diego can only put up 17 against that Arizona Cardinals defense, watch out, because Seattle's a better defense than that, and so it could get ugly. But I feel like that's one of those things you could say about Seattle all year, that games could get ugly. But I've got Seattle pretty easily in this one.
Yeah, I don't think there's much to talk about in this game. I'm picking Seattle. I mean, San Diego didn't look too bad the other night, but the fact that they could only put up, I believe, they put up 17 against Arizona, and their kind of makeshift defense, it just tells me that they're not going to be able to do hardly anything on the field against Seattle, even though they're going to be at home in San Diego. So I have Seattle winning pretty easily on this.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if Phillip Rivers even throws the ball at Richard Sherman, which Aaron Rodgers chickened out and did not throw the ball at Richard Sherman. So we'll see how that goes. It's kind of one of those catch-22s. If you throw at him, you might complete a pass or two, but you also might throw an interception or two.
Well,
so you're better off throwing off to nobody. So
here's what Green Bay did, though. They put their third best receiver, who I believe is also a rookie, against Richard Sherman. So it's not like Sherman was covering their best guys or his Rodgers' go-to guys.
Oh, no, absolutely. But obviously it didn't work out too well for them, putting their best receiver on anybody else. So
I mean, that was a loss.
You might as well put your best on him and hope you can get a couple balls in. But, hey, that's our preview for this week. Those are our picks for this week. But chances are you guys want some fantasy football picks. So we're going to go over ours for this week. Again, we're going to have a sitter, a starter, and a sleeper. So get your teams ready because we're going to do that. So, Patrick, let's start with who you think you should start this week.
I say, granted, if we're going to keep score,
you're terrible last week.
Matt was 3-0 in his decisions last week, and I was god-awful in mine last week.
Hey, but you know what? I lost a couple games in my various fantasy football leagues, so it doesn't always work out.
Matt admits to losing various. I will admit that I'm in a total of, I believe, 11 leagues, and I lost 2 of those 11.
I went 2-2, so I also lost 2. Who you got to start this week, though?
My start is going to be Noshawn Marino. They're playing the Bills, and they're playing the Bills and they're playing in Buffalo. But Noshawn had a very good game last week against New England, and I'm going to say New England probably has a better defense than Buffalo. So I think Marino is going to put up similar numbers, if not even better, this coming up week at Buffalo. So start Noshawn Marino in fantasy league.
All right. Well, I'm going to go a little bit different approach. I'm going to go defense, and I'm going to say you need to start the Texans. I know that that sounds a little bit odd maybe, but JJ, the Sultan of SWAT, is not a bad guy to have on that defense. They scored 20 points last week. I'm trying to think of who did Houston play. Scored 20 points against the Redskins, and it doesn't get that much tougher. They play at Oakland this weekend, so if they can put up 20 points against RG3, you can imagine they can probably do roughly around the same against an Oakland offense that's not exactly great, that struggled at times against the Jets last week. So I'm going to say start the Texans on defense. I know in a couple of leagues I've seen that they're free agents, so you might want to go out there and get them. So that's my starter. So now, Patrick, tell me who you should sit. Well, go ahead and say this because I totally just messed up. But go ahead and I'll cover myself. Who are you sitting, Patrick?
Okay, I have a big one for sitting, and I'm not basing it strictly on his performance last week, but I'm going to say sit Jamal Charles this week. He's playing at Denver, who has, as we saw, a pretty great run defense. Now, granted, Trent Richardson is not the best.
He's not the best back to gauge that off of.
He's not. He didn't really play terrible. Richardson didn't get but probably 8 touches. So, wow. I don't know off the top of my head how many Charles got. I know he shared the wealth a little bit with the rest of those running backs. But Denver has a very, very great run defense. And Charles did not put up the greatest numbers last week. He does have a tendency to kind of struggle early in the year and kind of pick up the pace later in the year. Plus, it's at Denver, so I'm going to save you guys the trouble of having probably 5 points with your number one running back and say to sit Jamal Charles.
Yeah, I actually thought about that, and then I figured you would probably say to sit Jamal Charles, so I switched. And mine's actually a pretty obvious one on the sit this week, so it's not going to blow anybody out of the water. But I say sit Toby Gerhart. I know a lot of people were kind of high on him coming in this year.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't look like he's going to be as good as it is. There's better options out there than him. He scored 5 points last week. He's questionable this week. Just sit him, find another running back, leave him on the bench. So that's all that needs to be said about that. Your sleeper pick, Patrick, who you got?
Ooh, that is a good question.
Patrick forgot his sleeper pick. Is that what happened here?
Forgot my sleeper pick.
Well, okay, while you're figuring out, you're trying to remember who your sleeper pick was, let me go ahead and I'll say mine, but then also correct my mistake. The Texans defense is actually my sleeper pick because that's who I'm meant to be a sleeper pick. My non-sleeper pick, but who I actually said was a starter this week, is actually the Arizona defense. They're playing the New York Giants this week, so they're probably going to get at least 2 interceptions off of Eli Manning, who has just doesn't look like he gotten any better. My actual start was Arizona's defense. My sleeper was the Texans' defense. But either one of those, I feel like you can flip-flop either way and say start or sleeper, but use those defenses this week. If you have one of those defenses, use them. If you have a crappy defense and they're on your bench, use them. If you have a mediocre defense and they're a free agent in your league, grab one of those 2 defenses and start them this week. You got your sleeper, Patrick?
Yes, I don't think this is my original sleeper, but it's probably a better sleeper than what I had. I'm going to say, obviously, no one drafted this running back, but I'm going to say pick him up off your waiver wire if you haven't already. I'm going to say put Isaiah Crowell in your starting lineup. He scored 2 touchdowns against the Steelers defense last week. They're at home against the Saints this week. While the Saints are an incredible team on offense, they're not so great on defense. And the fact that Cleveland is at home makes it even better. I can't say how well I think Crowell will do. Obviously, I think he's going to score at least 1 touchdown. But I'm going to say to pick up Isaiah Crowell off your waiver wire, put him in your flex, put him in your starting running back spot. He's going to put up some points again this week.
Yeah, a good choice there, especially with them announcing that Ben Tate's going to be out 2 to 4 weeks probably. I think that's the official announcement, if I remember right from what I saw. Yeah, Ben Tate's out, so you know Isaiah is going to be starting for sure. So that is a good pick for your sleeper. So, hey, that's our recap. That's our picks for this week. That's our fantasy picks for this week. That's a lot of NFL covered in one little bit there. But we're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back and talk about the story that we've talked about and that everybody else is already talking about. So join us when we come back, and we'll go close up shop. We're back for our last little segment here, and obviously we've got to talk a little bit more about Ray Rice. If you haven't listened to yesterday's short, go ahead and pause this, open up a new tab or a new video, find that and listen to that real quick so you can hear kind of everything else we've said up until this point, because that would be a smart idea since we're about to say more stuff about it. But look, it's got to be said that this seems a little fishy now. If you're not up to date from yesterday, they're now saying that that a police officer made sure that the NFL had this video back in April. So, Patrick, I mean, I'm trying to be nice here. I really am. But I feel like I'm losing my patience on whether or not to be nice on this, because
No, you should not be nice on this. Being nice yesterday, I can understand. Being nice today, no, they don't deserve to be someone to be nice to them today.
well, and look, Roger Goodell says he's adamant that he won't resign because of this, but I think right now, at least unless something else comes out in his favor, I think he doesn't have any option but to resign.
No, and here's why. He and the rest of the NFL preaches to the players, ownership, as far as front office, even the staff, protect the shield. If you don't do anything else in life, protect the shield.
And he's not doing a very good job of that.
Protect the image of the NFL. Protect the brand. Protect.
Well, something else that he's always been really big on, at least over the last year or so, as far back as I can remember, he's always been real big about saying when these guys get in trouble or something, that ignorance isn't an excuse. That you can't claim ignorance and say that, oh, well, I just didn't know I was doing something wrong. Well, you know what? This isn't... All he has claimed so far in all this is that he's ignorant to all these things. That he's ignorant to the fact that there is a video. That he's ignorant to the fact that he didn't know, that they didn't know the proper channels of whose jurisdiction was inside the elevator and whose jurisdiction was outside the elevator. Ignorance. That's all he's been saying. But yet, these guys get in trouble, and he claims, oh, you can't use ignorance as an excuse. Ignorance isn't an option.
No.
But yet, that's all he's done right now.
He even is directly quoted whenever he suspended Sean Payton for an entire year that ignorance is no excuse. That is a direct quote from Goodell in the league office. But yet he's going to play the ignorance card with, we didn't know there was a tape. We've never seen the tape. We never asked for the tape. We didn't know how to get a hold of the tape. But we mentioned this in the short, but if the NFL can't get the tape by just asking for it or kind of demanding for it, and TMZ Sports, who just branched off of TMZ probably a couple of months ago, they can get the tape, there's something wrong.
Well,
not only that, but we found out today from AP, who is a very reliable source, that someone, well, not only did law enforcement give the tape, but it was reportedly a female left a voicemail to whoever sent them the tape, verifying that they got it, but apparently she watched it because she said, hey, we got the tape, and you're right, it's terrifying. So not only are they lying that they didn't get it, someone in that office watched it.
Yeah.
And so I have a very, very good feeling he's lying, but there could also be some truth that they didn't think anyone had seen the tape, because apparently Pro Football Talk is saying that the NFL is doing their own internal investigation on who got the tape and who watched it. Well, but I think
there's a good chance Congress is about to be doing an investigation, or somebody more important is about to be doing an investigation, because it's getting out of hand.
It's getting very out of hand, and I don't see how Goodell can improve his already destroyed image.
Well, yeah, and I'm looking at a tweet that, and granted, I don't know if this tweet is coming from a lot. As apologies for that, but two little malfunctions is better than what we had last episode. So I guess a small improvement there. But yeah, I was just about to say, I've seen this tweet, and we're closing out because we're about to have to go because of time. Anyways, but and I don't know how reliable this tweeter is, but it says since Goodell took over in 2006, there's been 56 players arrested for domestic violence. Total suspensions for those guys, 13 games. And again, I don't know if that's true or not. I didn't check that. I didn't check the stats on that to see if it's right. But if that's even close to right, he's got to be gone, because that shows that clearly over the course of, let's see, what this is 2006. That makes this his 8th year in office. that tells me that you're not placing as big of a deal on this, and you don't think it's as big of a deal as what you're kind of claiming it does. Now, let's remember too that this is a guy who made what, $42 million last year?
Roughly 40, around the mid 40s.
You're spitting up cash. You can wipe your backside with cash. You can find this video. You don't need the NFL. You don't need cops. You don't need whatever. Because ultimately, now, I'm not even, again, kind of like yesterday, I'm not going to get into whether the justice system should have done something better about this and Ray Rice should have been in trouble because of that anyways. I'm talking strictly Roger Goodell. On your own, you could have found this video. If you were trying as hard to protect the Shield as you claim that everybody else in the NFL, even remotely involved with the NFL, should be doing, you got $42 million you made last year. Go find it. Ignorance is not an option. I'm quoting you on that, close roughly. I don't know his exact quote. But ignorance is not an option. If you're going to have a situation like this, you cannot do... You have to go every possible route to find out every little thing you possibly can. You can't leave no stone unturned, to use a little metaphor there. You can't leave any stone unturned. You have to go find this video. Because you can't tell me that you didn't think it existed. You can't tell me that you thought, oh, you know what, they probably don't have cameras in the elevator. Because you've seen... Well, guys, I spoke too soon. Had another issue. But hey, tweet at us if you want us to give you any more opinions on that. Feel free. We'll talk with you on Twitter about that. Listen to the other show, The Short, about that to get kind of some of our other viewpoints on that. But we are going to close out the show now just to see if we can solve these problems again. Because we had them solved for a while. I don't know why they came back. So follow us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter. Subscribe on YouTube. Leave some comments on those. Make sure you get your picks in, because we do have a game tomorrow. So try and get your picks in as early as possible so that we have those before games start. Although I don't think any of our games... I don't think we picked Thursday night game.
We didn't pick a Thursday game, so...
So you're safe until at least Saturday. But make sure you get your picks in so that we know who you are picking. But other than that, hey, keep an eye on this whole Ray Rice situation, because we could be a couple weeks away from having a new NFL commissioner. Hopefully, we can cross our fingers. That sounds mean, but he needs to be gone. So, hey, thanks for joining us this week. Patrick, you got anything else real quick? No.
Yes? No, just send picks.
Make sure you get your picks in.
Send your picks in. Hold on, real quick. I think we, as a show, owe some justice to whoever scored the most points in our fantasy league. So I'm going to pull that up real quick.
Yes.
Let's see.
Because I forgot to get that number.
For week 1. You'll never guess who it is. It's Chris Grady.
Oh.
The Tremendous Challengers.
The Tremendous Challengers. Chris Grady is your high scorer for this week. Obviously getting a win. So.
Not only did he get a win, but he beat me.
Oh, he destroyed Patrick. Perfect.
Beat me.
That's just about right. Well, hey, keep going on those fantasy teams. Make sure you're keeping up with it, and just so you can have a chance to beat Patrick, because you're not beating me unless you beat me this week.
You lost this week,
I know,
too.
I lost this week, too. So keep up with that.
Shout out to Sean, who not only is making picks, but he's also making some moves to beat Matt last week. So,
well, good luck to y'all in the rest of the weeks and this week. I don't know who I'm facing this week, but you're in for some trouble. So again, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. That's everything. Tweet at us, whatever, comment, let us know. But we'll see you guys next week at some point in time.
Tommy's rumbling. It's scary. Tommy's got the tum-rums. You know, in America it's bling bling, but out here it's bling bang, huh?
I already took what I call a wire shower. I rub my armpits with air fresheners. New car.
Oh yeah, I'm experimenting with some new entrepreneurial ideas. That one's called Sport for Thugs. Dress loud.